The poorest year, I pretended to be my sister to take care of her blind fiancé for 500,000. The day he regained his sight, I left without a word. We met again at a business interview. I am an unknown intern journalist. His identity was restored. He was the young master of the powerful Smith family. During the interview, it's been heard that during your illness, thanks to your fiancée Irene's unwavering support, are you two about to get married soon? A slight smile appeared at the corner of his lips as he raised his hand to reveal a ring. Yes, she and I are about to get engaged. However, his gaze, intentionally or unintentionally, fell on me in the corner through his glasses. Chapter 1. Before the interview started, there were discussions in the room. The young master being interviewed today is the head of the entire Smith family. I heard that 5 years ago he went blind and was even expelled from the Smith family. If it weren't for his fiancée's dedicated care, he probably wouldn't have made it. Keep it down. I sat on the side, forcing a smile. But my nails were deeply embedded in my palms. Suddenly, my senior Burton turned to me. Donna, go get me a glass of water. Just as I reached the water cooler near the door suddenly swung open. A familiar figure entered my line of sight, and my brain went blank instantly. In 3 years, Andy had changed drastically. His once slightly thin teenage figure had grown tall, and his features had become sharper. The eyes that were once foggy were now cold. Excuse me. He spoke lightly, his gaze passing over me through the glasses, as if looking at a stranger. Without any pause. Escorted by several bodyguards, he walked up to the stage. As he passed by me, a chilly woody scent lingered. I stood frozen in place, and a few seconds later, I suddenly realized. The 2 years I spent by his side were when Andy was at his lowest. He was kicked out of the Smith family, blinded in an accident, and of course, he had no idea what I looked like. It's better this way. As I returned with the glass of water, the interview had already begun. Andy sat on the stage, fingers interlocked under his chin, calmly gazing at the audience. He was answering those commercial questions. Suddenly, the side door of the stage was pushed open. Irene walked in, smiling as she complained to Andy. Sorry, Andy. The crew had some issues, so I'm late. She wore a gorgeous champagne-colored dress and took a seat next to Andy. The whole room fell silent for a moment, and the atmosphere immediately became heated and ambiguous. Burton, holding the water cup, glanced at me sideways as if he had discovered a new continent. Donna, don't tell me, you and Irene, you look a bit alike. I pursed my lips and forced a smile, saying, She's a female celebrity, you're flattering me too much. Of course we look alike. Because she and I are sisters. Chapter 2. I heard that during your illness, thanks to this Irene by your side who never left, are you two about to tie the knot? My throat suddenly tightened as I looked at Andy on stage. He slightly hooked his lips and raised his hand to reveal his left ring finger. On it, there was a simple silver ring. It was the one I bought part-time back then just to make him happy. The noble young master of the Smith family, wearing such a cheap ring, seemed out of place. But he seemed unaware, lightly brushing his fingertips over it. Well, she and I are about to get engaged, he said, his gaze sweeping from the stage below. Intentionally or unintentionally, it fell on me in the corner for a moment before being withdrawn. The microphone was handed to Irene again. It's been said that you're currently filming director Lou's movie. He rarely uses new actors. Is there any involvement of CEO Andy in this? She admitted with a smile, of course. I've always been confident in my professional level, but I don't deny that Andy has really done a lot for me. I am fully deserving of this favoritism. Her graceful and generous attitude actually won the admiration of everyone present. Someone asked, Can you share the story of how you and CEO Andy supported each other during your low points? Irene's smile suddenly froze on her lips. In the eerie silence, time seemed to slow down. After a while, Andy chuckled lightly and took the microphone, saying, "There's nothing much to say. The memories between her and me, it's enough for just the two of us to know." My eyes suddenly stun, gripping the pen in my hand, feeling a bit flustered as I lowered my head. Whenever I closed my eyes, I would think of the past. The young Andy, because of his unruly personality, had offended many people. After he hit rock bottom, some people deliberately came looking for trouble. To protect him, I was pushed down the stairs, covered in blood. Those people were frightened and pushed each other to run away. I gritted my teeth, stood up, pretending as if nothing had happened, and walked back to his side. Let's go home." But Andy suddenly held my hand. "You're hurt, let's go to the hospital." "I haven't. I smell blood." His voice suddenly raised, tears rolling down from those misty eyes, like stars covered in ash. The young man's not-so-broad arms tightly embraced me. He spoke, but what he called out was my sister's name, Irene. "After I recover, I'll give you the grandest wedding in the world." Chapter 3. After the interview ended, the sky darkened. Outside, the rain curtains were dense. Burton patted his pocket and started calling me again. "Donna, the storage card is in there, go get it." I stepped on the damp ground and ran for a bit. The elevator's numbers jumped to 1. The next second, the door opened. I collided head-on with the two people inside. Irene slightly tilted her head, chatting with Andy about trivial topics from the set. Although his expression was indifferent, he listened patiently. Intimate posture. Seeing me, Irene's expression immediately turned extremely unpleasant. "Sorry." I mumbled an apology, turned around, and planned to take the stairs. But Andy spoke behind me. "Stop." I froze in place. "Aren't you taking the elevator?" "Go ahead." I turned around slowly, deliberately lowering my voice. "Thank you, CEO Andy." He told me to use the elevator but didn't move aside, just staring at me. "Are you also a reporter for today's interview? Why didn't I hear your questions?" I lowered my eyes. "CEO Andy, I just graduated and returned to the country, still an intern reporter, not qualified to ask questions." "I see." He replied lightly, lost in thought. Irene, on the side, glared at me fiercely and said, "Let's go, Andy, we have to meet Director Lou and the others tonight." Andy finally averted his gaze. "Let's go." Chapter 4. Alone in the ascending elevator, I stood there in a daze. After my parents divorced, my father took Irene and climbed up the Brown family, becoming a son-in-law. I have never met Irene since I can remember. But 5 years ago, she suddenly found me. "I'll give you 50,000, you take my place, and help me take care of someone." At that time, my mother passed away due to illness, and our family owed a large sum of money. With no other choice, I agreed to her request. Only after meeting did I realize that the person she wanted me to take care of was Andy, the young master of the Smith family. He was also her fiancé who had recently encountered trouble. A blind man, or an abandoned child from a wealthy family, who would be willing to take care of him. She looked disgusted. If it weren't for considering the bad reputation, I would have divorced him long ago. At that time, Irene had just debuted. She had accepted a good role, and her career was on the rise. Afraid of being criticized for being heartless, she passed on this unpleasant task to me. Andy had sailed smoothly for 18 years, only to suddenly face a mishap. His temper became very bad. During the time I was looking after him, I was constantly ridiculed by his harsh words. I did my job without arguing, taking the money. Until one day, when I visited my mother's grave and returned a bit late. He started venting his bad temper again. "Irene, stop acting in front of me. Don't think I don't know, you actually despise me in your heart, you're just afraid of others criticizing." He couldn't finish his sentence. Because I suddenly lowered my head and kissed him. It was actually my first kiss, with no technique involved, and because of a bit of anger, it felt more like a wild animal's bite. Andy fell silent all of a sudden. Even the tips of his ears turned red. You! With a hint of malice, I bit his lips again. Then I stepped back a bit, holding his shoulders, breathing rapidly. Do you feel it now? Do you still think I despise you? Chapter 5. I went downstairs to find Burton with the storage card. He seemed pleased. Donna, you're quite diligent, perfect, there's a dinner tonight, I'll take you to meet some people. Networking is crucial as a reporter. I quickly thanked him. But when we arrived in the parking lot, I saw a familiar black Rolls-Royce. I froze. Is CEO Andy here tonight too? Burton turned around and winked at me. I brought you here for CEO Andy's dinner. Donna, don't underestimate the connections of your boss. Regret came too late at this point. I could only brace myself and follow him inside. Fortunately, the private room was quite large. As a small reporter like us, we were not seated at the same table as Andy and the others. Burton introduced me to many industry seniors. This is our company's new recruit this year, a clever young lady named Donna. Donna, come and say hello to everyone. As a newcomer, I couldn't avoid toasting. By the end of the drinking session, I felt dizzy, barely managing to apologize before covering my mouth and rushing to the restroom. I vomited uncontrollably. After rinsing my mouth, splashing my face with cold water, I walked out. The corridor was dimly lit. A familiar figure stood in the shadows by the window. My heart pounded fiercely. Initially, I thought of pretending not to see and just going back. Just as I took a step, Andy behind me spoke. With each word, his slightly deep voice seemed to carry numerous complex emotions. Donna. My steps towards the front froze in place. Struggling to swallow, I heard his footsteps approaching steadily. Subconsciously, I closed my eyes. The sound of those footsteps stopped in front of me, his familiar scent inching closer. I opened my eyes to see his deep, ocean-like gaze. CEO Andy. Nervously tightening my throat, I whispered, "How do you know my name?" He didn't speak, just looked at me for a while before straightening up. Your seniors have been toasting with you all around the room, everyone in the private room knows your name. Thinking of Burton's loud voice, my face suddenly felt hot. Sorry, the seniors are very kind to us newcomers, maybe too enthusiastic. If it's disturbing CEO Andy's mood, I apologize to you. I explained carefully, fearing to inconvenience Burton. I also apologized to him. Andy fell silent again. Under the warm yellow light, he squinted slightly, looking at me with a smile that wasn't quite a smile. In Donna the reporter's eyes, I seemed to be a very calculating person. I lowered my head and mumbled, "That's not what I meant." The next moment, a gold-embossed business card was handed to me. You're still in the internship period, right? There's a job opportunity, would you like to give it a try? Chapter 6. When I went back, my head was still spinning a bit. As soon as I entered, Burton pulled me over. Are you okay, Donna? I rubbed my aching stomach and whispered, Sorry, Burton, I had surgery on my stomach before, so I can't drink much. He furrowed his brows, about to say something. His gaze dropped to the gold-embossed business card in my hand. Eyes widened in disbelief, he exclaimed, Is that CEO Andy's personal business card? I nodded, thinking back to the scene just now. It was the legendary business card that was hard to come by, directly connecting to the man himself. No pain, no gain. I cautiously raised my eyes, remembering to disguise my voice. Why would CEO Andy give such a precious opportunity to an unknown journalist like me? He smirked slightly, probably. Because he finds you more agreeable. That was quite an Andy-like reason. Taking care of him for those 2 years, later on, I gradually got to know Andy. He would show some unruly temperament in front of me. For example, at certain moments. Gritting my teeth, I swallowed the tiny sound between my lips, tugging at his hair. You can't see, stop moving around. In the dim light. The young man lifted his head slightly. Soft bangs brushed over his unfocused eyes. He licked his lips, fingers tracing my neck, gently applying pressure. Softly, he said, other places are fine. So, speak louder. Let me hear. I snapped out of it, hastily making up an excuse to appease Burton. The next day, when I returned to the company, the boss called me over. With a smile, he said, Donna, the popular emotional reality show, get ready as a special observer to participate in the recording. After I started working. The next episode to be interviewed was Irene and Andy. After that interview, the news of their engagement made a big splash on the hot search list. As a promotional preview for the show, the fans in the comments section went wild. Having gone through lows together, now meeting at the peak, what a beautiful love story. It said that Brown's company was originally struggling, but with the strong support of the Smith Group, it's thriving now. Power couple, if you're not a fan, you're missing out. I scanned through the comments and closed the section. The host confirmed the script while chatting with me. If we could uncover the specific story of CEO Andy and his fiancée from those 2 years, the show's impact would definitely be great. I tightened the pen in my hand and softly replied. Every detail of those 2 years and what happened, I knew better than anyone. But I couldn't say. Chapter 7. With the resources and connections of the Smith family, Irene is now a top-tier female celebrity. As the show began, the live broadcast room was filled with millions of viewers. In the spotlight, I heard the host speak. I heard that CEO Andy and Irene are already discussing marriage. Can you share the journey of their hearts? Irene turned to look at him, giving a slight smile. I never believed those rumors and slander about him. In my eyes, Andy has always been the one I love the most. She gazed at him affectionately. Her eyes were so tender they could almost drip with water. Andy lowered his eyelashes and chuckled, lies. When my eyes were blind, do you remember how you despised me? Have you forgotten? Irene hesitated. Her gaze shifted to me, a hint of bitterness flashing by. But in front of the camera, she could only force a smile. I don't really remember. Probably as our relationship got better, I only remember the sweet parts of our love. I glanced at the real-time barrage behind me. Words like so sweet filled the entire screen. Setting the script aside, gripping the microphone tightly, I asked Andy. It seems like the two of you have some differing views. Is there a hidden story? Why not talk about how you two reconciled? I thought he wouldn't speak. But after a moment of silence, Andy spoke up. When my eyes were first having issues, I was very disheartened. I resented the whole world, and I didn't like her. She would leave early and return late every day, and in between, she had to take care of me. One day, she was so busy that she forgot to turn off the stove while the fish was simmering. When she returned, the kitchen was already on fire. My throat felt like it was blocked by something. In a daze, it felt as if I were experiencing that evening again. The residual heat from the flames lingered in the air. I dragged Andy out of the room. Grabbing his collar, I slapped him and asked fiercely, "Do you want to die?" The whole person, and my voice. Both were trembling. He didn't argue with me as sharply as before. Instead, he remained silent for a long, long time before hoarsely asking me, "Would it be bad if I died? Wouldn't it be a relief for you too?" It was as if in that moment, I suddenly realized. The once high and mighty young master of the Smith family was now nothing more than a pretentious and decadent little dog. So, gasping for breath, I pushed him into the room. The walls, scorched by the tongues of fire, were blackened. I unbuttoned his shirt one by one, whispering, "I didn't have dinner, so you owe me." As if he realized something, he said, "Have you thought about?" I silenced his words with a forceful kiss, swallowing them down. "Andy, I never thought of you as a burden." That night, it felt like the whole world was in chaos, leaving just the two of us. And now, he brought up the past. Sitting beside him was his intimate fiancée, Irene. The whole world believed that those memories belonged only to them. The suffocating bitterness burst open in my heart. In the uncomfortably close distance, a familiar yet unfamiliar scent emanated from Andy, quietly enveloping me. Overwhelming. But it was no longer mine. He paused for a moment, amidst the applause of the live audience, and finally said, "I will always remember the moonlight that night, shining brightly enough to illuminate everything. I couldn't see, but she spoke all night long." I tightened the pen in my hand and hurriedly lowered my head. My eyes stung. Chapter 9. Because I made some last-minute changes to the questions, many unknown details came out during the interview. This interview was a great success. By the end of the show, the audience in the live broadcast room had exceeded tens of millions. For the first time, the untold secrets of the Smith family's ruling figure were dug up. Everyone seemed very excited. Backstage, the host patted my shoulder. "You're truly a remarkable journalist." Those last-minute questions were sharp enough to force them to answer. As I turned around, I saw Andy and Irene approaching. She suddenly fell silent. Andy's gaze passed over indifferently. "Did you prepare today's questions?" I nodded. Irene said sarcastically, "Donna, you're really good at hitting where it hurts. But let me remind you, you should adhere to basic professional ethics. Don't fantasize about things you're not worthy of." I didn't say anything. I just looked at Andy again. His expression was cold, and he simply said, "Donna is very capable. From now on, you will be in charge of media relations with our company." Irene suddenly looked at me. In her eyes, there was fear and hatred that couldn't be concealed. She stopped me in a secluded corner, her eyes alert and disdainful. "Donna, you are truly insatiable. You clearly took money from me before, now why are you back?" I calmly looked at her. "I graduated and came back to work." A very ordinary sentence. Work? "Donna, do you think I'm stupid?" She suddenly went crazy, swung her bag towards me. "Hurry up and leave. Tell him that you voluntarily gave up the job, or you won't have another good day." Her Hermes bag crashed to the ground, the chain opened, spilling its contents everywhere. I ignored her and walked away. Irene followed through with her words. Suddenly, I started hitting walls everywhere. Several job opportunities that should have been mine were all replaced by others at the last minute. One evening before leaving work, my boss suddenly called me into his office. "There's a very important annual development conference next month. You will be the host." I was slightly stunned, and he continued, "It was CEO Andy's specific request for you to do it. After work." Across the street from the company, a very familiar Rolls-Royce was parked. The window rolled down, revealing Andy's indifferent face. "Since reporter Donna seems so curious about my past, why not come and ask me in person?" I lowered my head. I didn't mean to pry into CEO Andy's privacy, it was just for work. "Even for work, I gave you my personal business card, you could have contacted me to ask." I pursed my lips. "There's no need." Because in that moment, I suddenly realized it was already 3 years later. He was the powerful CEO Andy. Not the young master of the Smith family, with a bad temper, who, after being scolded, would pitifully seek comfort and kisses from me. The Brown family had already declined. Without Andy's acquiescence and tolerance, Irene would never dare to target me so openly. Perhaps. For him, that past is actually a disgrace, something he doesn't want to be mentioned. I was about to leave. But Andy stopped me. "Wait. He pushed open the car door, took a step with his long legs, and stood in front of me. "Donna, can we talk?" I hugged my bag to my chest and asked hoarsely, "What does CEO Andy want to talk about?" Andy smirked. In his eyes, there was a hint of helplessness as he said, "Can we talk about work?" Chapter 10. In the following half-month, Andy came to see me twice to check a few important decisions to be announced at the press conference. Finally, as if he suddenly remembered something, he handed me a document. The large-scale tourism project that has not been announced is a collaboration with government agencies. You can announce it at the press conference as an exclusive news piece you unearthed. I remained silent for a moment. I took it and said thank you. Burton knew about this and kept advising me. "It seems CEO Andy appreciates you. Should you subtly bring up Irene's suppression of you to him?" I smiled as I edited the hosting script. No need. Would he really cause trouble for his fiancée for a stranger reporter? On the day of the press conference, the venue was packed. The seat in the middle where Andy should have been sitting was empty. Amidst the flashing lights, I was announcing several important collaborations of the Smith family. Suddenly, a strange reporter stood up and loudly accused me. "Where did you steal this kind of top-secret information from?" I frowned. My collaboration with the Smith family is completely legitimate through proper channels. Legitimate? A person like you who uses unspoken rules to climb up the ladder, are you even qualified to say such things? He shouted loudly, "I have evidence." Someone walked up on stage. It was Irene. She stared at me and sighed softly. "Donna, it's normal for a small reporter like you to be attracted to Andy. I was going to give you some face, but you really are shameless." The large screen behind me suddenly switched from the PowerPoint to a few explicit photos. And the person in the photos was me. "You sent him these photos, went to his hotel room in a camisole in the middle of the night, and the surveillance footage of you and your leader in a hotel room." As she spoke, the large screen behind me changed again. The dimly lit hotel entrance, where I and the leader walked in side by side. "You, this habitual offender." Amidst the uproar in the audience, the main door of the hall suddenly opened. In walked Andy, impeccably dressed, his gaze sharp as he scanned the room. It swept past my face, without stopping for a moment. My heart sank suddenly. The spotlight on the stage shone on me, like some sort of public execution in front of everyone. For a moment, there was a buzz of discussion in the audience. Doing such things is simply disgraceful for us journalists. So despicable, truly disgusting. No professionalism at all, she should be shut down. I didn't look at anyone, just stared at Andy intently. Watching him look at Irene, he said lightly, "What did you just say?" Irene's eyes reddened instantly, tears on the verge of falling. "Andy, you've been deceived by her. She deliberately disguised herself as an interviewer to get close to you, just to steal confidential information from you, harming the entire Smith family. Even this opportunity to host independently was obtained through unspoken rules." Andy fell silent for a moment, then looked at me. "Do you have anything to say?" Chapter 11. What did I have to say? In Irene's gaze as she looked over, I felt her hatred and satisfaction. Suddenly, I felt absurdly ridiculous. She and I were just 2 years apart. We were full sisters. After our mother passed away, we were supposed to be the only, closest people in the world to each other. I smirked, a mocking smile on my lips. I tightened my grip on the microphone and spoke. "I want to say, CEO Andy, your fiancée is speaking falsehoods, spreading rumors. If you choose to turn a blind eye to her distortion of truth and fabrication of facts because you love her, I will truthfully include this incident in today's press conference news release. The public has eyes. A decision maker behind projects where right and wrong are blurred is probably not trustworthy. Whether it was the previously arrogant young master, still the decisive and powerful leader as rumored. Upon hearing such a blatant threat, most people would be angry. But he simply walked up to the stage under the lights, step by step, standing at the same height, facing me from a distance, calling my name in a very soft voice. Donna. My heart was suddenly filled with a sourness that came out of nowhere. I didn't want to hear him defend Irene anymore. I turned my head, and word by word, I said, "All the accusations against me are baseless rumors. I only had professional interactions with Irene's fiancé, CEO Andy, with no personal contact." No contact? Before I could finish speaking, Andy's voice suddenly interrupted. "You gave me a ring, but don't intend to take responsibility for it?" Chapter 12. I was stunned, and I quickly turned to look at him. He raised his left hand, revealing the plain silver ring on his ring finger. It was made of cheap material, with average craftsmanship. But because of its owner's meticulous care, it reflected a brilliant luster under the lights. This ring seemed to instantly drag me back to memories from 4 years ago. It was Andy's 19th birthday that day. For the first 18 years of his life, every birthday was extravagant and lively. Only this time, I was the only one accompanying him in his desolation. To make him happy, I worked for 2 days in between revising my paper. With the money I earned, I bought a pair of cheap couple rings. When I got back, I grabbed his hand and put the ring on for him. Andy couldn't see it, but he could feel it. His ears turned red, yet he still managed to ask me, "What is this?" I teased him. "I found this ring on the roadside after a couple fought and threw things. Master Smith, please don't look down on it. Don't call me that." His Adam's apple moved as he carefully held the cheap silver ring close to his chest. "I like this even though I found it. Because you gave it to me." He kept his word. In the days that followed, even during the happiest moments between us, he would wear that ring. Then he would ask me in a whisper, "Can you feel it? It's the love you gave me. Relax a bit, be careful not to trip." Only at times like this, he would reveal a bit of the unruly and unrestrained attitude that belonged only to the young master. Coming back to reality from my memories, Andy was stepping closer to me. "Speak, Donna. There's nothing much to say." I gripped my skirt, whispering, "CEO Andy, you've mistaken. Isn't this ring the token of love Irene, your fiancé, gave you?" He chuckled. "I never mentioned how I got this ring." "How do you know so clearly?" As he spoke, he had already stopped in front of me, inevitably close, with no way to avoid it. Whispers spread through the audience. "What's going on?" CEO Andy mentioned that the person who helped him through a rough time was actually that little journalist. "What about Irene?" "Don't say anything, they really do look quite similar." Irene looked at me with hatred in her eyes. But she had to soften her tone to coax Andy. "Andy, don't be fooled by her. This person has always been full of lies, with a criminal record." I closed my eyes, suppressing all the emotions surging inside me. When I opened them again, I could calmly look at him without a ripple of emotion. Yes, it was from me. Back then, I pretended to be Irene for money, deceived you for 2 years. Later, I left with the money, and I had already forgotten about the past. Since you believed from the start that person was Irene, and even got engaged to her, what's the point of unraveling it now? I couldn't continue. Swallowing the choked-up emotions, I took a few deep breaths. I put down the microphone, ready to leave. But in the moment I turned around, my wrist was grabbed. Our skins touched, and the familiar warmth seeped from his palm. His voice sounded low. "Of course, it's meaningful. You said, as long as I wear the ring you gave me, no matter where I go, you'll recognize me at a glance. Is that still valid?" My eyelashes trembled intensely. Lowering my eyes, I buried all my emotions in my voice, deep in my throat. Just slightly prying open his fingers, I pulled out my hand. When I raised my head again, my expression was indifferent. Forgot. Chapter 13. I lied. In fact, during the years I studied abroad, I would always think of Andy. In the winter of his 19th year, just before returning to the Smith family. It was the peak of our love affair. The winter in the northern city was extremely dry, even a kiss would spark a slight stinging sensation from the static electricity. I had considered confessing my identity to him. There were many moments when our emotions were intense. He would whisper in my ear, calling me softly, Irene. Irene, don't leave me. It felt like a sudden splash of cold water. In that moment, I suddenly realized. From the beginning, when I came to his side, it was with a difficult-to-mention purpose, replacing another person. Andy once told me, when I was a child, my cousin tricked me into the closet, locked the door, and I almost died in there. In my life, I hate being deceived the most. If he knew the truth, would he also hate me to the core? On the eve of Andy's 20th birthday, the patriarch of the Smith family fell seriously ill and unexpectedly learned the truth from back then. Andy had been deliberately framed from the beginning, even the car accident was orchestrated. He sent someone to contact Irene to bring Andy back. Irene came to find me. She was already a famous actress, raising her chin, looking down at me arrogantly. Now that the Smith family wants to recognize him again, are you still dreaming of flying high? Stop dreaming, whether it's the Smith family or Andy, they only recognize me, Irene. From the beginning, you were just a counterfeit product. She took out a check from her bag and threw it at me. Here's another 500,000, stop dreaming unrealistically. Otherwise, I'll reveal everything from back then. I suddenly raised my head, staring at her. Irene, your mother is my mother too. My mother is a lady from the Brown family, what is she to you? She sneered, just a prostitute. The sun was setting that day. The light was blood red. I lost my sanity, grabbed Irene's collar, and fiercely punched her twice. In her screams, someone rushed in from outside, twisted my arm, and pushed me to the ground. The glamorous actress stood above me, looking down at me condescendingly. Did I say something wrong? Take the money, go abroad honestly, and don't come back to bother us. Otherwise, I'll have someone engrave those ugly deeds from back then on her tombstone. She left. I stared at the check floating lightly on the ground. I thought back to 2 years ago. Because my mother fell ill, our family borrowed a lot of money. After she passed away, I couldn't even afford a decent grave for her. It was at that moment Irene contacted me. Need money? Without letting me finish, she sneered. She only raised me for a few days. Once a person dies, they're gone. Why should I give her money? I thought she was holding a grudge and tried to explain. Initially, she wanted custody of you. You were crying to go with Dad. Of course, I want to go to the Brown family with Dad. Do you think I'm as stupid as you? Irene's face turned cold and she cut me off. What, do you still want to keep me here, living the same poor life as you, unable to even afford a grave after death? I looked at Irene in front of me. All the words stuck in my throat, unable to utter a single word. On her face, which was 6 to 7 points similar to mine, with exquisite makeup, was full of impatience and disgust. The silk dress, the diamond necklace around her neck, the crocodile skin bag slung over her arm. Anything she casually took out was a price I couldn't imagine. She picked up the coffee on the table and took a sip leisurely. Finally, she revealed her purpose, however, for the sake of us being sisters. If you need money, I can give it to you. 500,000, you pretend to be me and take care of someone for me. Chapter 14. The original press conference had turned into a farce. Seeing the increasingly strange looks from the people present, some even turned the microphone and camera towards her. Irene, is what CEO Andy said true? Wasn't it Donna the journalist who accompanied him when he was down and out, not you? Are the accusations you just made all rumors? She couldn't refute and could only look to Andy for help. Andy, you know me the best, I've been with you for so many years, how could I do something like this? Andy looked down at her in the audience, smiled. Don't be afraid, aren't you the evidence? The lawyer has arrived, and everything today is being accurately recorded as evidence. His voice was gentle and soothing. Irene seemed to have seen something terrifying, suddenly trembling all over. The press conference couldn't go on. I tidied up the script, turned and left the stage. Andy silently followed behind me. It's raining outside, let me drive you. The downpour was pouring like water. After 3 seconds of contemplation, I decided not to compromise myself. As I got into Andy's Rolls-Royce, I glanced over and saw a hint of hidden joy in his eyes. However, when I took out my phone, I realized that what had just happened at the press conference had been live-streamed by the cameras. It was now trending. Under several trending topics, netizens were arguing. So Irene took credit for the young journalist's achievements? How shameless! What do you mean, took credit? This kind of woman who advances by opening her legs, who's to say she's not lying? It's been verified, those nude photos are peas. Even if it's really her, she was in it for the money from the beginning. The job is done, the money is taken, what's there to feel wronged about? Am I the only one who feels bad for Andy? Neither of these two women are good, both deceiving him. Suddenly, my heart felt like it was stuck. I quickly turned off my phone and looked out. Rainwater was like tiny rivers streaking across the glass window. The lights outside were rapidly receding, blending into a colorful mishmash. Compared to 3 years ago, the cityscape hadn't changed at all. But between Andy and me, everything had changed drastically. At that time, the Smith family hired the most famous expert. After 2 surgeries, Andy finally regained his sight. The bodyguard Irene hired at a high price guarded me around the clock, fearing I would go see Andy and reveal the truth. However, on the day he regained his sight, those people voluntarily took me to the hospital. Behind the hospital room door, I couldn't see Andy. But I could hear his insecure voice, Irene. Andy, I'm here. Irene whispered, I'm really worried about you. Her deliberately altered voice almost completely matched mine. Andy didn't notice anything strange. Andy spoke somewhat unhappily, you promised that once I regained my sight, you would be the first person I see. You've broken your promise. I couldn't bear to hear the rest of his words. A sudden, intense pain surged through my heart, almost engulfing me entirely. From the beginning, in Andy's world, the one who had been by his side for the past 2 years was Irene. Not me. Not Donna. Irene's bodyguard dragged me into a nearby lounge. Shortly after, she walked in with her high heels clicking. Her makeup was as exquisite as ever. Only the lipstick on her lips was smudged. It's Andy's doing. He really loves me and can't bear to be without me. As she touched up her makeup, she calmly said to me, you've taken good care of him these 2 years. But for him, everything was done by me. You, with your lowly status, could never, ever have any connection with him. Chapter 15. Where are you going? Back home? Andy's voice suddenly interrupted my thoughts. I lowered my head slightly. Could Chairman Andy please drop me off at the company? I still have some work to take care of. Instead of starting the car, he rested one hand on the steering wheel and leaned in. His expression seemed somewhat sad. Donna, do you have to address me so formally? His familiar scent was so close. Mixed with the refreshing smell of rain, it enveloped me, almost dragging me back into countless memories. At that moment, I suddenly didn't want to endure it anymore. Pushing him away, I looked at him coldly. Then how should I address you? Young master, or Andy? Do you want to repeat what you did 3 years ago, shouting Irene's name at me when I was injured protecting you? He fell silent suddenly. Those 2 years are over. The person engaged to you was Irene all along. Your life is back on track, so why come back to entangle me? But this isn't my right path. Andy looked at me, his eyes reddening slowly. I never met Irene before. From the start, the only person I recognized was you. A sharp pain rose from the depths of my heart. Closing my eyes, my voice trembled uncontrollably. You're still lying to me. Andy, on the day you regained your sight, I was outside the hospital room. I heard you confidently mistaking Irene for me. You embraced her, kissed her. He suddenly interrupted me. I didn't. The moment I opened my eyes, I knew she wasn't you. I was suddenly stunned. Hearing Andy's seemingly calm voice. The situation in the Smith family is very complicated. In the hospital room that day, there was not just one monster with evil intentions, wanting to put me in harm's way. So the moment I realized she wasn't you, I made a decision. Irene is the best, the perfect target. He smirked, a hint of coldness in his smile. Since she likes impersonating others, why not let her have a taste of it? Suddenly, some news footage flashed through my mind. I had seen it while studying abroad. It said that Irene had encountered a real explosion while filming, nearly perishing in the flames. It also mentioned that when she and Andy were out together, they were hit by a huge billboard, narrowly escaping with their lives. I didn't mean to not recognize you. Actually, many things happened in these 3 years. After grandfather passed away, one after another, people from the Smith family came out, wanting to kill me. But now they are either in prison or in the underworld. This even includes my biological mother. In fact, I'm not afraid of death. When my cousin went crazy and stabbed me when forced to give up all shares, I didn't feel the pain. At that moment, I just missed you. Chapter 16. The parking lot was quiet. Under the dim car lights, he took off his suit, unbuttoning the buttons of his white shirt one by one, revealing the scar near his heart. The Smith family is too chaotic, not so easily obtained. But it doesn't matter, after today, Irene and the last forces supporting her rise to power should also fall. The entire Smith family, including me, can be yours. He gradually approached, gazing at me closely at a close distance. His eyes, once permanently unfocused and gray, now shone like the stars encompassing the entire universe. I swallowed hard and whispered, "But you're already with Irene." I have never been close to her, never. He slightly emphasized his tone. I am clean, sister, you can check for yourself. Just that one sentence, the rational string in my mind completely snapped. Rushing forward and pulling open his collar, countless passionate memories from the past flooded my mind. His lows were also the most uncertain and bewildering 2 years of my life. All those tumultuous emotions, with nowhere to go. In the end, it all turned into an intimate embrace between us. On the overturned car seat, I grabbed the tie wrapped around Andy's bare neck, just like the countless moments of joy after our past conflicts. Pulling a little, tightening. A slight sense of suffocation. Andy squinted his eyes, letting out a comfortable sigh. I miss you so much. He hugged me, burying his face in my neck, his warm palms rubbing against my waist side by side. They are so foolish, how could such a meek and obedient vase ever be you? No one can ever portray your likeness. His originally cold and stern voice was now filled with desire. By the time the wind had calmed and the rain had stopped, it was already deep into the night. Andy drove the car to a villa. The slightly disheveled tie still hung around his neck where the red mark remained. I took out my phone and saw a news headline with a bright red explosion word. #Irene taken in for investigation. Last month, my half-brother from the same mother contacted her, threatening to reveal her secrets, forcing her to steal bidding documents and other confidential files from me. I fell silent for a moment, whispering softly, "I know." "You know." Andy suddenly turned his head. "Was it your arrangement, Donna?" I nodded, pinching my palm, forcing myself to look at him. I came back this time to destroy the Brown family, to ruin Irene, and to reopen the case of the rumors about my mother from 20 years ago. For this outcome, I can pay any price. This is the most important reason for me being in the media industry. 20 years ago, because she caught my father's eye. The young Miss Brown set up a trap to frame my mother, accusing her of engaging in illicit activities. And young Irene, in order to live the life of a young lady, actually helped an outsider. She personally pushed her own mother into the abyss. My mother was detained for 15 days and lost her job. Upon returning home, all the neighbors pointed fingers at her, sympathizing with my father. After my parents divorced, my mother, carrying that humiliating label, took me back to the countryside in a sorry state. She lived in melancholy and passed away at just over 50 years old due to illness. And on the day she passed away, the hospital TV was reporting news about the Brown family. They said the Browns were loving, their children outstanding, and even in the midst of high society, they were exemplary. How ridiculous. When my mother died, she weighed less than 70 pounds, her hands were covered in green and purple puncture marks from needles. She could have lived a long life. The Brown family's business isn't clean either, they have harmed so many people, are they worthy of being called exemplary? I covered my eyes, forcing back the surging tears. Andy, I used you because I knew you wouldn't let go of those who betray you, so I let her intentionally violate your taboos. If you feel hurt because of this, resent me, it doesn't matter. But I must personally send her to hell. I suppressed all emotions, trying to look at him as calmly and steadily as possible. But, sister, your hand is shaking. Andy grabbed the hand behind my back, carefully brought it to his lips, and kissed it. Don't feel scared. You used me, and I'm happy about it. It proves that you have me in your heart. Of course, I will stand by your side. I've said it before, the entire Smith family, including me, is yours. Chapter 17. The news of Irene being taken in for investigation caused a stir for 3 days. The Brown family wanted to suppress public opinion, so they came to Andy. Sitting behind his desk, Andy listened to their request and smiled. What you're saying is touching. But how this matter is decided, sorry, it will be up to my fiancé. My father, with his affluent wife, turned to look at me. Their faces changed instantly. I smiled at them slightly. Both of you should get ready as soon as possible. Because soon, you will be just like her. Andy held a press conference to clarify his relationship with Irene. When asked, he smiled ambiguously. Fiancé? I've never admitted it was her. I've always been referring to the one who accompanied and took care of me initially. Someone asked, but wasn't it because she took money from Irene that she took care of you? Andy's smile remained, but his eyes grew colder inch by inch. To that reporter, I advise you to choose your words carefully. There are so many wealthy people in this world, why would she only take money to care for me? Isn't it because she loves me? The reporter fell silent. I, sitting beside him, also fell silent. After the press conference ended, I released the recordings from back when she came to see me. A blind man, or an abandoned child of a wealthy family, who would be willing to take care of him. She only raised me for a few days. Once a person dies, they're dead. Why should I give her money? Do you want to keep me here, living a poor and miserable life like you, unable to even afford a burial plot? The public was in an uproar. No way, how come I remember her always portraying an elegant and graceful female star? She and Donna are biological sisters, and she actively sought someone to replace herself. From head to toe, she spent over $1 million, not even willing to pay for her own mother's grave, so disgusting. Taking advantage of the raging public opinion, I started a live broadcast. In front of millions of people, I revealed the truth from 20 years ago. Elsa, the Brown family's eldest daughter, set her sights on my dad. They refused to clarify things and ended up divorcing. They conspired together to frame my mom, making her bear the embarrassing title and live the rest of her life in shame. Standing behind me was a timid man. During my studies and internship, I inquired everywhere, putting in great effort. Finally, from a fellow senior in the industry, I found out about this person's whereabouts. He had a habit of stealing and pickpocketing and had been in trouble a few times. That incident back then was orchestrated by Elsa. Donna was indeed innocent. She was deceived by her own daughter into attending a party at the Brown family, got drunk, I helped her to her room, and placed a stack of money under her pillow. Elsa had someone call the police in advance. Before my mom, intentionally drugged, could regain consciousness, the door was pushed open by those cracking down on vice. Even now, framing a woman, spreading rumors, labeling her as a harlot, is all too easy. Let alone, in that era. I studied media, work in the media industry, not just for this case. I will spend the rest of my life seeking justice for all the wronged and slandered girls. Chapter 18. This live broadcast was the final nail in the coffin for the Brown family. From the beginning, their rise to power was not clean. Now, with strict investigations underway, they were caught red-handed. It's never been me supporting them, but my good half-brother from the same mother. Andy said. It's just some cooperation on projects that can be easily withdrawn from, no need to worry about it affecting me. I finally felt relieved. I submitted all the evidence I had collected over the years to the authorities. Thanks to Andy's clean break from the Smith family after taking over, he was not implicated. The day the Brown family was completely destroyed. I held a bouquet of flowers, took Andy to the cemetery to visit my mom. In the photo on the tombstone, her smile was still so gentle. Yet, it always carried a hint of sorrow. She was a kind and gentle woman who truly loved my dad. And for that reason, she never managed to move on all these years. When she was on her deathbed, she held my hand and asked me not to blame Irene. She said, "Your sister is not of the Brown family's bloodline, she must have had a tough time there." She didn't know. For so many years, Irene had always belittled and humiliated her. She sought favor in front of Elsa, slowly gaining a foothold in the entire Brown family. She began to decay from the day she was brought into the Brown family. I gently ran my fingertips over the photo on the gravestone, saying, "Mom, no one will ever think you were at fault for that incident back then. I now have a successful career and a boyfriend." Andy stood beside me, softly correcting me, "Fiancé." "Okay, fiancé." Subconsciously, I turned my left hand's ring finger, where I had a matching silver ring with Andy. After going abroad years ago, I had hidden it at the bottom of a box. I thought I would never have the chance to wear it again in my lifetime. I arranged the bouquet of flowers in front of the gravestone, stood up, and bowed. As I turned around, Andy was staring at me, saying, "Donna, wait for me in the car outside. I want to speak with Auntie alone for a few minutes." The cool autumn night breeze. I waited in the car for a long time before seeing Andy come back. His black coat was damp with dew, accentuating the sharp contours of his face. I turned to him and asked, "What did you say to my mom?" He started the car. After a while, he finally spoke. "I thanked her for bringing you into this world. Otherwise, I would have died in the depths of despair 5 years ago, back in the summer." Chapter 19. When all the dust settled. I successfully transitioned and even got a promotion. Started independently handling interview assignments. It was a high school girl who had been bullied by the rich kids in the school for a year. She jumped from the school rooftop. Those people have money and power, no one can mess with them. My boss looked at me, hesitating, "If you don't want to go." Of course, I want to go. I took the documents. Coincidentally, I'm working on a campaign plan for an advocacy event on bullying. I'll send it to you this afternoon. Rarely, Andy now had money and influence. I leaned on him, of course, I had to make use of it. This interview, along with the subsequent planning of an anti-bullying awareness campaign. For almost half a month, I've been extremely busy. I hardly had time to see Andy. He sent 20 messages before I could squeeze in a moment to reply with an emoji while holding a sandwich and reading the news. That evening, he said he had a surprise for me and insisted I come home. I pushed open the door. The night sky was filled with twinkling stars. In the steamy room, he was propped up against the headboard, breathing heavily like a little dog, looking at me. His eyes seemed sticky, entwining with me. "Donna, you've been neglecting me for so long." I stared at him for a long time, and even the decisive CEO Andy's ears turned slightly red before I took off the camera strap and threw it at him. "Put it on yourself." Because I had been out all day, my voice was hoarse. "I'll go take a shower first." Andy was very obedient. When I came out with wet hair, he had everything arranged. Only a small lamp was left on the bedside, and moonlight trickled in like melted ice water. Even so, it couldn't cool down the damp, steamy room a bit. "Donna, kiss me." "You're too nervous." "Let me come closer." Every word, every sentence, combined with his seductive eyes, all carried an enticing meaning. It was already the late night after the storm had passed. Suddenly, I remembered something. Next month, I have to go on a business trip out of town for a very important interview. It's about a young girl in the mountains who has been collectively abused by the villagers. She walked through the mountains all night alone before reaching the town's internet cafe to contact me. It's quite underdeveloped there, with complex local powers, so it might not be easy to intervene, which is why I'll stay longer. His hand tightened on the bone protruding from my back. It could be dangerous. So be it. I didn't mind much, sat up, and gave him a gentle yet firm response. Seeing him staring at me intently, I reassured him with 2 sentences: "I will do my best to protect myself. But this is the mission and duty of us media workers." Andy fell silent for a moment. Suddenly he said, "I'll go with you." "But don't you have a very important contract to discuss next week?" "It can be postponed." "Why?" "Actually, it's not necessary, I tried to reason with him. But all the words that were about to come out were warmly interrupted by Andy's fervent kiss. That kiss traveled down, stopping at my most sensitive neck, breathless and wet. With a hoarse voice, he said, "Because I am your most loyal guardian. Just go and realize your dreams, I will escort and protect you."